One of the challenges that Connecticut's facing is our budgets are 2-year cycles. I think that a lot of our politics is in 2-year cycles too. You can get really, stuck in on these very niche, narrow problems. But the challenges facing the economy around growing our population, around growing housing, that's been happening for decades. And so what are the true long-term problems that we have yet to solve? So how are we chipping away at those?
Welcome back to the CBIA BizCast powered by Google. I'm Amanda Marlowe, and today I am joined by the director of the CBIA Foundation for Economic Growth and Opportunity, Dustin Nord.
Thank you for having me.
Dustin, you've been here almost a year now. We haven't had you on the podcast, but really wanted to bring you on for two things. A, to learn a little bit about you, but also to learn about the work the foundation has been doing, over the past year. The foundation was really created to kind of dig deeper into Connecticut's economy, look at some of the trends and provide solutions to really help Connecticut's economy grow long term. So you guys have been you've been very busy this year. But tell me, first a little bit about you, kind of, where you came from and how you got interested.
Absolutely. So I grew up here in Connecticut. I was born and raised in Avon, Connecticut. I actually, I traveled around a lot. After school, I didn't want to ever come back to Connecticut until I went other places and realized how great it is here. So I ended up coming back. I worked for the YMCA for a number of years. And then prior to this, I worked at AdvanceCT, where I worked on their research team. So looking at opportunities to ultimately grow the Connecticut economy through recruiting companies from out of state. And so we were doing background research. But ultimately what I learned there was that there's a lot of opportunities to do deeper dives into policy and understand what are the issues facing Connecticut, what are the things that we can improve, where can we be better as a state. And the foundation presented a really cool opportunity to have that platform to look at and see what are the areas that Connecticut can be better and where can we make tangible recommendations to be a better state.
What attracts you to, the data, the economy? What has always kind of drawn you in?
It's a great question. The first time I never liked math. I hated math as a kid, but I learned about economics in college and I started studying that. I actually read Freakonomics when I was in school and I thought, wow, this is pretty interesting. And as I got into it, I realized that a lot of people don't really understand data, not because they don't have the capability to, but because they're just not exposed to it a lot. And when you start to dig into it, you can start to find some really interesting, fascinating insights from that data. It's all public. It's all out there. People are collecting it. It's just finding the right questions to ask. And I always found that really interesting is formulating those right research questions and then ultimately coming up with something that maybe is illuminating an area of our lives that previously we hadn't thought about. And so that's what's always drawn me to it. It's just that it's a little bit like magic, the things that come out of it. And it's just the opportunity to help other folks see what I see in that data.
And so what kind of, data and research have you been really following closely this year for patterns?
I mean, this year has been an interesting year, the last 12 months especially. So it's a great time to have started being here. In terms of at the federal level, we're looking at tariffs and what the impacts are on trade. And so looking at data around trade, understanding how that's impacting the national economy, how it's impacting our local economy here in Connecticut. It's looking at the labor force. And this is the first time in the last 15 years where we've been at what economists call full employment, where there's really not that many people on the sidelines looking for work. And so how is that impacting prices? How is that impacting hiring? How is that impacting job openings? And what does that mean for the policies that we need as a state in order to be competitive long term? So it's been a really interesting 12 months around those areas.
We're going to dive a little bit deeper into some of that data in a little bit here, but Opportunity Connecticut, we have it right here with us. It was released in September of 2024. Tell us a little bit about some of the findings of the report and some of the specific areas that you've been looking at. Yeah,
so Opportunity Connecticut was created with a lot of input from stakeholders around the state. We held 30 forums across the state. We looked at studies from previous years that other folks have done, whether it's at the governor's office. We had the CREATES report from 2021. So there are a lot of different pieces that went into it. And ultimately it was whittled down to 3 areas. So that was the business climate, workforce and education, and quality of life. And in quality of life, we had energy, transportation, housing, and childcare. The business climate piece was the part that we heard from folks a lot. That was the primary thing we heard about Connecticut. What is the main thing holding us back? And it's that business climate. That is not just at the state level, it's at the local level, but what are the things that are challenges towards businesses being able to set up shop, to be able to expand, to be able to hire, to train? And what are those things that are making it difficult for them to do business here in the state? And what are some tangible recommendations we can make to make it a simpler process for those companies? That was the biggest one. But the other ones are still important too. Workforce and education continues to be a challenge. Like I said, we've had this, we're at full employment. We're trying to upskill. We're trying to train. What are the things we need to do there in order to do that better? And, on the quality of life, it's mostly about the cost of living in Connecticut and how do we improve that cost of living around housing? We have high housing costs, high transportation costs, high energy costs. How do we bring those costs down and make it easier for folks to afford living in Connecticut in the long term? Yeah,
we know in order to fill some of these, 70, 80,000 open jobs at any given time recently, we need people and we don't have enough people right now in the state of Connecticut. So it's really attracting those people, bringing people like you who left the state to come back, and make a life here.
Absolutely.
And, I want to talk a little bit. Obviously this report it's a living document. So it's intended to continue to be worked on. A lot of people know about CBIA in terms of the advocacy efforts at the Capitol, but how does what you're doing differ from that?
Yeah, absolutely. I think on the, one of the primary differences is that I don't advocate specifically for a specific legislation, right? We're focused on long-term thinking. What are the challenges facing the state? And those might take the form of different legislation, not necessarily in one session, but over time. I think that's where previous reports fell short, and that we're hoping that we can maintain with Opportunity Connecticut is that continual improvement that we have there. It's nothing against the previous studies that have been done. It's just that this is an ownership opportunity for CBIA and the foundation to say, these are areas where we can see, we want to track that improvement over time. Some of it is looking back to those other reports, actually incorporating those recommendations into our Opportunity Connecticut, and then just holding ourselves to account and being able to understand and track over time, where are we seeing that progress? This year we've been fortunate. We've hit almost 2/3 of the recommendations with some kind of an update so far, whether that's legislative or administrative, or that's just outreach on our part. So, that's what we want to be able to do, is to be able to show the public that this is something that we're taking seriously over time and not just a one-off report that's going to sit on a shelf somewhere.
Yeah. So let's talk a little bit about that. Some of the examples of solutions that are already being worked on.
Yeah, absolutely. So, this session, I think the big things that we heard from that are very pressing right now were things like energy, housing. And so there were things within this report that ultimately were advocated for. Not all of them were able to be implemented, but things like the first-time homebuyer tax credit was something that came out of this report, where we're trying to allow people to save money over time and be able to afford their first home. But that was something that we heard during the creation of this report that we wanted to implement. And that was something that was advocated for. And we're hoping in the future, we might be able to ultimately get that across the line. It also opened up new opportunities for collaboration on things like energy costs. There was a large bill that was passed this session about energy costs, trying to bring down energy costs. And, I feel confident that the Opportunity Connecticut report helped start some of those conversations and push those conversations in a bipartisan, cooperative way that allowed people to kind of get to the table and be level set on what is a challenging problem for the state.
I think also, the regulatory environment, going back to that business climate being
Absolutely.
such a big one, that was something that a lot of the forums, that was top of mind for businesses. And we saw that, in the energy and environmental kind of realm.
Yeah, absolutely. We had the Transfer Act that was ultimately replaced this year with release-based regulations, which is a huge change. It's going to open up billions of dollars in investment. And again, I think the collaboration that this project has, and the foundation combined with the report, has opened up. We have more open lines of communication with the state government, folks at DEEP, folks at DOT, that we can collaborate with them on areas where they're trying to improve. How can we help them in that process? In the areas where they're looking for ideas on how to improve, how we can participate in that process, and how do we get the good news about the state out to the businesses, and also give them the feedback that businesses have. And I think that while CBIA has always done a great job at this, this has been an opportunity to, again, level set those conversations and be able to have a very open conversation about those challenges.
And obviously there were so many conversations that happened in order to create this report, but the work hasn't really stopped. You've been holding forums around the state over the past several months to kind of continue to get more information. Mm-hmm. Tell me a little bit about those.
Yeah, so we've held a few different types of forums. So we held back in March, we had a housing forum where we talked to businesses and developers about some of the challenges that are facing them with respect to recruitment and retaining talent here in the state and how housing has played a role in that. That helped inform our housing report that we put out last month, discussing some of those challenges and the economic constraints that puts on the Connecticut economy. Additionally, we're working on a project about how we can improve work-based learning in high schools so that we can improve access to work-based learning opportunities for students across the state. So we've had forums, we had 4 forums so far that included businesses, educators, advocates to discuss what are the big barriers, what are some areas that are specific recommendations where we can knock down some of those barriers to ultimately make it easier for the 1/3 of kids in the state that don't ultimately go on to 4-year college or go to the military. What are we doing for them, and how do we make sure that they have the best platform possible? And that's what those forums have helped sort of to inform what the recommendations will come out of that report.
And these forums have really brought people together that aren't always sitting on the same table, mm-hmm. Having these conversations.
Yeah, absolutely. We've had teachers, whether it's people from the CEA and the teachers union to nonprofits that are funders or that they're actually implementing some of these programs. Then we have developers and businesses who are interested in topics, but maybe not always familiar with the space as it relates to the advocacy around it. And it's giving them exposure to what opportunities are out there for them to be involved. I think there's a huge opportunity for businesses around the state, especially, to be engaged civically on some of these topics. There's a lot of local opportunities for them. And I think our forums so far have provided a jumping off point for some of these folks looking to get engaged.
So at these forums that you've held about workforce, housing, you're getting a lot of anecdotal research. How does that kind of compare? How do you put that together with, actual data? Yeah,
absolutely. I think there's some of that anecdotal information helps inform where to look. So I think that's part of the value of that anecdotal data. It helps inform what types of data points do I need to look for. But then from there, if there is data to support what people are feeling, then I want to be able to show that. So it's just being able to provide that toolkit about what does that actually mean that you're feeling. So for example, on the housing front, we talked about with businesses about the challenges that they have with recruiting talent to Connecticut. They look at the home prices, or they just don't see a home available, and they say it's a great job, you're offering plenty of money, but I just can't take it. And so that informs where I should look. So I'm looking at things like, what are the housing starts over the last 10 years? Are we building enough? Has the housing stock grown? And does that translate well to what businesses are experiencing? In that particular case, the answer was yes. We have seen lower housing production, and we have seen, an increase in prices that has outpaced the country over the last few years, especially. And so this thing that anecdotally we're hearing, we can then provide that feedback and say, this is not just something that exists in your head. This is something that's real and tangible, and we hope that they can use some of that data to inform the discussions they have with their local leaders, with their state leaders, whoever that may be, and they can be armed with that information.
So that way, when you offer solutions, mm-hmm. you have that information that really, can only go so far in discussion.
Exactly. And beyond that, it gives us something to track in the long term too. We can say, how has that changed? If we make some policy changes, we look down the road 5 years from now, 10 years from now, and we look back, did that make a difference? Did those policy changes actually make these target areas of data, did those change at all?
It kind of goes back to what you were talking about at the beginning, where you said there's so much data, but people don't know what to do with it. They don't know necessarily where to look for it and how to read it.
Yeah.
So how does, this really, you and the foundation are really helping put these puzzle pieces together?
Absolutely. I think data doesn't speak for itself. I think that's something you hear from economists and researchers all the time. Like, there's a story to the data that you need to be able to tell. and you need to be able to back up your stories with data. So it goes hand in hand. These kind of cycle around each other. But at the end of the day, you need to be able to tell that story. You need to give people something that they can connect to and relate to on that data front. So you can't do it without the anecdotal evidence from people and talking to folks. And, you can't get everywhere you need to be without doing that data. So, these things go hand in hand with one another.
Now, obviously you've been studying Connecticut's economic data for a long time. Is there anything that you've started to notice, any patterns that you're really seeing this year that the business community should be aware of?
I think
the greater community
overall, I think one of the challenges that Connecticut's facing is the fact that while we've had better population growth in recent years, we had a period of time where we actually had a shrinking or stagnant population. We've had tens of thousands of people growing the population in Connecticut. We still don't have nearly enough people, and our labor shortage is relatively acute compared to the rest of the country. Everybody has a labor shortage around the country right now, but Connecticut's is acute. And I think we're seeing that in the data in terms of persistently high job openings and very low unemployment. At the same time, I would say that in recent months, I think it's worth keeping an eye on are things like our unemployment rate has been ticking up while the country's overall has been relatively flat. We don't want to go back to what we saw during the 2010s where we had an elevated unemployment rate relative to the country. So I think the labor side is still a big part of that story. And then beyond that, it's continuing to look at data around really diving into things like housing. And are we building enough housing units? Connecticut hasn't really been building enough housing units. Are we able to accelerate that production so that there are enough places for people to live to grow that population and workforce? And so I think that's the second part of that is it's not just about the individual data points. I think they're all interconnected in some way. And how do we make those connections to find those types of insights?
And really show that to people in a way that they can really fully understand, wrap around. Why do you think all of this research is so critical to the state's long-term success? We're not looking at, what's going to happen in the next 3 months while we're watching trends. Why do you think this research is so important long-term?
I think the big thing is that Connecticut, our budgets are 2-year cycles. I think that a lot of our politics is in 2-year cycles too. And so if you're just relying on what's coming out of any given administration, if you're just relying on what's coming out of the news, which is obviously following a lot of those administrations, I think that you can get really, stuck in on these very niche, narrow problems that are happening in the moment. Tariffs are the big problem today, or they're the big conversation today, but the challenges facing the economy around growing our population, around growing housing, that's been happening for decades. And so being able to zoom out, I think allows a greater understanding of what are the true long-term problems that we have yet to solve. And then so how are we chipping away at those? And it gives you a sort of a guidepost to be able to say, this is where we want to get to. And are the recommendations we're making in the near term allowing us to get to that end goal, or are we just too stuck in the near term nitty gritty details of any given session or any given news cycle?
In addition to the report, I know we're also going to be putting out, additional, white papers and some further data for people to look at, to really compare Connecticut with not only the other New England states, but the rest of the country. But the foundation is also really focused on kind of putting Connecticut out there, doing more to bring the community together. The foundation, has hosted the U.S. Chamber Foundation's National Civics Bee, Connecticut State Finals, and launched the Coolest Thing Made in Connecticut last year. Why do you think initiatives like this are so important to the mission?
I just don't think you can build a strong economy or a strong state without that kind of engagement. And I think the business community, CBIA, plays a huge role in being able to bring those folks together. The Civics Bee was the first year that I've had the opportunity to participate. And I'll be honest, at first I didn't completely understand it, going back to when I was told about it. And then just a couple of weeks ago when we had that final, you could see why it was important. You had kids that spent the last year in their communities trying to understand what are the problems facing their communities, trying to fix those problems or at least participate them in those fixes. And that was very inspiring to watch these folks participate and compete on this front, because I think that's where the long-term success of our state is in those people looking at whether it's young people or older folks, I say older folks, but like just people around the state being able to say, what are the areas that I have problems in my community and where can I participate? Where can I make a difference? And I think we play a big role in being able to show and elevate some of those voices to say, this is what that looks like. And this is where you can be successful. This is what you can look to. Beyond that, I think it's also, when we think about the coolest things made, that is just another, I don't think people fully appreciate what Connecticut has. Again, I spent my whole life growing up here and I didn't know 90% of the things that I know about what's made here, who works here, the history that's here. There's an amazing, rich, deep tapestry of things that are in Connecticut. And sometimes that's almost overwhelming because there are so many things. And I think in our role here, we can help highlight some of those great things and really, really improve the stature for Connecticut so that people want to live here. People want to grow their businesses here and people want to participate.
Yeah, there's certainly so many different manufacturers that are around the state that we certainly get to highlight with the coolest thing made competition and really see during manufacturing work month. So the work really doesn't stop. We like to spend some time also talking to our guests, about just kind of lessons learned, bringing people to the table. What kind of lessons have you learned in your career and now stepping in as director of the foundation that you think have really helped you succeed?
Honestly, I always tell people I worked at summer camp for a long time. I worked as a counselor and I became a director. And I think nothing can teach you humility better than like working with kids and dealing with the issues that they bring to the table. Every time you think you know something, you get surprised by it. And I think that's what I hope to try to bring to what I do is that there are so many perspectives in this world, and assuming that you know the answers ahead of time can lead you astray. And so just trying to have that humility, be humble when you enter into a problem. When I go into a research question, not assuming the answer before I start, helps open up a much broader world of opportunity. And I think beyond that, it's just being open-minded about the kinds of questions and being curious about the world around you. I think there is a lot of, more so than I ever appreciated up until a few years ago when I really started working on state level issues, there's a lot of opportunity to have agency in our community to be able to put your voice out there, to vote on a topic, to join a local board or commission or whatever that may be. There are a lot of opportunities out there, and a lot of it just comes down to whether or not you want to do it and whether or not you want to be enthusiastic. And if you are, there's so many chances for you to do that. And that's my other big piece. Just put yourself out there and see what ultimately fits, and just don't be afraid to put your name and voice onto a thing that you care about.
So on that point, how can businesses who haven't really been involved, or maybe were a little involved at the beginning, went to a couple forums, but want to continue to be more involved? Yeah. What should they be doing? So
on our front, on the foundation side, we're continuing to recruit people to be on our leadership subcommittees. So each one of those pillars that I described have a group of folks who are helping guide the research going forward. So we have our business climate, workforce and education. We're starting up a housing group soon to talk about issues related to housing and businesses, challenges on the housing front. So you can join one of those. You can continue to stay engaged with the foundation and see what forums are out there. And then honestly, on the note of what I was just talking about, when we talk about every single one of these topics, whenever we have these forums and discussions, I think what I hear from businesses is that one of their challenges is, while these topics are important to them, they don't know how they can fit in to actually make their voice heard. But you should go to your local P&Z meeting and hear what people have to say in your community. You should go talk to your local first selectman and hear what they have to say about some of the very topics that are in this report, because all of this, while I can provide a lot of great research and I can provide a lot of great forums and I can give ideas to the advocacy team, ultimately, this requires people to participate in our processes here in Connecticut. And if they want to make their voices heard, then I encourage them to do that. And I hope that this helps inspire some people to do that.
So certainly for businesses, if you're listening, want to get more involved, certainly they can reach out to you. You also have been posting a lot on CBIA Foundation's LinkedIn page to really keep people and businesses involved, and look out for some new reports that will be coming out this fall.
Exactly. We're going to have a dashboard out there as well. You'll be able to track our progress on Opportunity Connecticut and see where we're excelling, where we still need to do more work. But I'm always interested in feedback from folks. If people have interesting research ideas, I always like to talk to folks about it. So don't hesitate to reach out and have a chat.
Great. Well, thank you so much for being here with us today, Dustin.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
And thank you for listening to this week's BizCast. You can listen, like, and subscribe to our podcast wherever you get your podcasts. Please leave us a review and let us know if you have ideas for a future podcast. For more episodes, head on over to CBIA.com.